What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller and Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com. We are coming at you today with our Big 12 basketball preview. It's been a little while since we've done a basketball video, thanks to some very obvious recent events. This is a time where just men's basketball is going to pick up really fast. The Big 12's a gauntlet, and we have the Longhorns opener ahead on Saturday on the road against OU. So we get started with Red River right away. And I'm excited for it. I'm excited for Big 12 play. We've had kind of a lull in the Longhorns schedule here lately, and we've seen them put up a ton of points, 197 points in the last two games combined. They have been on fire, including a 41-pointer from Marcus Carr. That was something. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Like I said, I'm excited for a Big 12 play. See where this team goes. Currently ranked number 6, still with only one loss on the season. Rodney Terry, acting head coach, seemingly unlocking this offense recently, even if it comes at the detriment of letting up more points and giving up more on defense. But what are some of your thoughts heading into Big 12 play?
Yeah, I think overall, grading the non-conference that. We still have that Tennessee game, but pretty much that's finished. I think it's a success. 11-1 wins over Creighton and Gonzaga. Obviously, that tough loss in the Garden to Illinois. But if you went into the season and told all Texas fans, even the team, they're going to be 11-1 headed into the first Big 12 game of the year, 100% would take that with some of the tougher games on the schedule. So, yeah, I think obviously, like you mentioned, there's some things surrounding the program that we really can't dive into because we don't know a ton about. But Rodney Terry's taken over the team, and they seem to have gotten their swagger back after that first game against Rice. That was a bit sloppy. Like you mentioned, 41 from Marcus Carr earlier this week. And it feels like that wasn't a fluke. It wasn't like he was just draining a bunch of tough shots with a hand in his face. This offense has really opened up, getting the playmakers the ball in space, allowing them to work and knock down open shots. So I'm excited for Big 12 play. Once again, the toughest conference in America, which is good and bad. You're going to have a lot of opportunities to put some big wins on the resume, but pretty much 18 games of, you could lose any one of these. So it's always fun as a fan and someone covering the team to be able to watch and talk about such high-level basketball. And it is pretty intriguing that Texas opens with Red River this Saturday. I can't recall the last time that the first Big 12 game of the year has been against Oklahoma. So I think just another wrinkle and another storyline added to the season. So I'm excited, and I have high hopes for sure.
Yeah, I didn't really think about grading the non-conference, but obviously we had a wrinkle thrown in there. My personal grade would be, like you said, off the court events aside, I would probably just give it a flat out A. For an A+, I would say you had to close out the Illinois win. So, but otherwise, yeah, looking really good. And in contention right now for a very, very high single-digit seed, or low, whatever you want to look at that, a 1 or a 2. And so, you kind of got a buffer too with the strength of schedule in the Big 12. So, heck, even if Texas loses 6 or 8 games, God forbid that they get close to 500 in Big 12 play. But even if they do that, then you're still probably looking at a 3 or a 4 seed. So they're in a good spot right now. That's for sure. Yeah, and I guess we can go ahead and hop into talking about do you want to start or end with the Big 12 predictions as a whole, and then get into OU? I didn't really.
Yeah, I'm cool going either way. I think, we can talk about Texas and how we think they fit into the conference, and then maybe transition over to the conference as a whole.
Yeah, let's do that. So, I just, before we hopped on here, just pulled up the latest odds that I could find for the Big 12 men's basketball champion. Now, this is the regular season odds, not the tournament. The tournament is always wonky, and so I don't really want to predict that until that comes along. And And this was, as of December 10th, so a little bit outdated, but it's the newest ones I could find. It had Kansas at the favorite at plus 215, Baylor in second at plus 230, and then Texas in third at plus 350. And then you had a two-way tie next between TCU and Texas Tech at plus 900 apiece. So I'm going to assume since then West Virginia was like third from the bottom. They've probably shot up a little bit. And then Tech probably has gone up a little bit because they've been pretty solid. And yeah, so
I would say I think those are pretty fair. I would be surprised if the winner of the conference wasn't one of Kansas, Texas, or Baylor. And not even being a pessimist, I would say it's fair to say that Kansas and Baylor are ahead of Texas in that three-man race, just because the pedigree's been there. We know what Bill Self does in the Big 12 conference, and the one person who has been able to knock him off the pedestal in the past decade and a half has been Scott Drew. So I think it's very fair to have those two at the top, with Texas a close third. Yeah, I do think it's going to come down to how those teams play against each other. If any of them can take one on the road and go 2-0, I think that throws a major swing in favor of one of those teams. But yeah, I would say I'm certainly bullish on the Longhorns in Big 12 play, but they seem, more of like a 12 to 13 win team rather than a team that's going to win 15 games and actually win the conference outright. That's just kind of my view on it at the moment.
Yeah, I would be more up toward the 15, 16 win mark if we didn't have the Dessou injury issues, Tyrese Hunter going cold recently, and obviously, the coaching situation. But we do. And so, realistically, I think third or fourth place in the conference is where you would be shooting for. You want to set yourself up well for the NCAA tournament. As much as I think Texas fans would love a Big 12 championship, I mean, we won the Big 12 tournament, 2 years ago? And as meaningless as that seemed because Kansas was disqualified due to COVID-19 issues, and just the entire thing was a mess, and then we end up losing that game. Probably don't want to bring it up, but losing that game that we did in the round of 64 as a 3 seed. So, I mean, this team, you want to set them up well, and that's all you can really ask for. I think there's some opportunity in the top 10 this year if you can set yourself up favorably to have maybe less of a gauntlet than you would normally get in the NCAA tournament. But in terms of the Big 12, like I said, I think third or fourth would be a good way to finish out. I think if we hit 14 wins, for me, that's where I start considering it more of a success in conference play. That's my expectation for it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you made a good point that, Texas fans saw what happened. When you're a 3 seed, you're still, somewhat vulnerable. Doesn't happen too often, but 14 seeds have been known to knock off 3 seeds. And obviously, as you climb down the seed list, that upset potential just grows. So if you are able to secure a 1 or a 2 seed, that just elevates you that much more, pretty much gives you a free pass into the second round. And then you're not really playing a top 25 team until a potential Sweet 16 matchup. So I do think it is huge for seeding for the Longhorns. Obviously, put their best foot forward the next 2.5 months. But even while it might seem inconsequential, if you win the Big 12 or win the Big 12 tournament, all those wins will add up. And like we mentioned at the top of the show, every win in the Big 12 is a good win. So a lot of resume builders here. And I think if you end up with 14 or 15 Big 12 wins, you're going to be a number 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, which something Texas hasn't done in a long time. And would be interesting to see. I think the way I want to take this is, you mentioned it offline, but we were talking about Marcus Carr's most recent performance, and I think a lot of it has to be attributed to kind of what Rodney Terry is doing with the offense. A lot of off-ball movement, guards running around, taking off ball screens, coming off hard, looking to shoot. And yeah, I think it's just big, not putting the guards in situations where they aren't dribbling the air out of the ball. They aren't forced to take a bad shot with 3 seconds left on the shot clock. Really working early in the shot clock, trying to get a good look, because the age-old I'm stumbling on my words here, but basically what has plagued Texas basketball, even through the Shaka Smart years and year one of Chris Beard, was the offense would go stagnant, way too many shot clock violations, terrible shots at the end of shot clocks. But seemingly in the 4 games with Rodney Terry, the Longhorns have been playing with more tempo, putting shots up earlier into the clock, gives them more chances for offensive rebounds, and which just in turn leads to more points. Like you mentioned, 197 points over the last 2 games. Granted, the competition wasn't as stiff. That's still tough to do. And yeah, all credit to Marcus Carr, who scored at least 17 in those 4 games. And is just really on a tear, averaging 25.8 points over the last 4, doing it very efficiently. Was 10 of 15 from deep against Texas A&M Commerce. And I'll just mention again, that 10 of 15 isn't just luck. He was set up in great spots to be able to knock down threes. Defenders really weren't bothering him. And once a guy like Carr gets into a rhythm, it's hard for him to break it. So I'll be interested to see how this offense transitions into the Big 12 gauntlet. That's going to, provide a lot tougher defenses when it comes to scoring the basketball.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Carr has been playing tremendous here recently. I mean, one of the bigger things you're seeing this year is, and I would have to jump back here to see here. Let me see. One of the bigger adjustments to his game is the fact that he's getting more open catch and shoot looks. Like you mentioned, off ball. I mean, this Rodney Terry offense is free flowing. There's a lot of more space, and for guys like Tyrese Hunter, Marcus Carr, Arterio Morris, those sort of guards that were having a more difficult time hitting the 3 ball. Well, Tyrese Hunter still is struggling, but I think that's mostly his own shooting was. But Terrio and Marcus Carr definitely being able to hit the 3 ball as well as they have the last few games. I think a lot of that, like you said, is attributed to just more space, more rhythm in the offense. The ball is moving. Maybe not always quicker, but it's moving with more of a purpose with each pass. It's mirroring more of what you're getting in like an NBA sort of system than you would with most college teams. Because for the last few years, it feels like 90% of the offensive possessions I've seen for Texas are drive and kick or run inside out. And sometimes those end up going together. And a lot of times that ends up turning into iso ball, dribbling the ball way too late into shot clocks and just really not getting in any sort of groove on offense. You start getting your players in funks, and yeah, you mentioned just, the long scoring droughts that we've seen recently. And but we'll see. I'm saying all this, we're talking about the last 4 teams that we've played. What now? It's like, was it Rice, Louisiana, Texas A&M Commerce, and Arkansas Pine Bluff? Were those the last?
There's Stanford.
Stanford, right. Yeah, I guess Stanford was a little bit better test, and we put up 72 points. Louisiana's not a bad team. I think they're a little bit underrated, but they are not very good defensively. So, and A&M Commerce definitely is not very good. They're in their first year playing Division I basketball. So, we'll see when we start playing some of these better defensive teams. If, some of these, all this off-ball movement, you mentioned a lot of the off-ball screens, if a lot of these dribble handoff plays are going to keep working, or if teams are going to start figuring out, and then, getting in the passing lanes a little bit more often, switching better, and, sticking to the few 3-point threats that Texas actually has. And we'll see if, Texas can end up making the adjustment there. But it has been fun. I mean, yeah, Marcus Carr, my favorite stat that I saw from that game on, what was that, on Tuesday? Yeah, I think it was Tuesday, against A&M Commerce, was that he had 19 field goal attempts and 41 points. I think a stat that people often overlook when you're looking at offensive efficiency for individual players is points per field goal attempt. It's great if a player gets 30 points, but if they took 32 field goal attempts to get there, you're just a stat sheet stuffer. So, I mean, the fact that Marcus Carr is averaging more than 2 points per field goal attempt, even for a guy like James Harden that gets to the free throw line a ton, or a guy like Kevin Durant, that's quite the impressive mark. It doesn't matter who you're playing. So, I mean, Marcus Carr's found his shot. He's playing with an incredible level of offensive efficiency right now. And so we'll see if he can keep that up.
Yeah.
Man, that's been a welcome sight.
I would say to Texas fans, we saw his struggles in the Illinois game. He has had his fair share of struggles in his year and a half on the 40 acres. So don't expect for it to be this smooth for, the remaining 20 to 25 games of this season. There are going to be some hiccups in the road. And I think, don't be so reactionary. Of course, it's great to praise his 41-point outburst, but obviously that's not the norm. Nor is a 2 for 13 performance in the Garden the norm either. He's somewhere in the middle, probably leaning more towards the 41-point game. But yeah, as long as he can stay pretty efficient, he's going to be one of the better guards in the Big 12. It'll be interesting to see what happens when, like you mentioned, Tyrese Hunter in a bit of a cold streak. Can we find a balance where Hunter and Carr are both attempting, 12 or so shots a game, putting up hopefully, 15 or so points a game? Or is it going to have to be one of those things where one of them's cooking, the other one's off? Because if you can find that middle balance where they're both playing like some pretty good basketball at the same time, it's going to be really tough for opposing defenses to stop. Just unfortunately, so far this season, rarely have there been games where kind of both of them have found their rhythm. Do you, have any reason why you think that's happening, or is it just kind of a slow part of the season for Hunter and a good part for Carr?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've watched enough of Marcus Carr to know that he can be a streaky scorer. Here's what I would say is that the problem with getting them both going at the same time is that a lot of the ways that Carr's getting open right now is because Hunter is taking over the role more of just a primary distributor instead of even a primary playmaker, facilitator, whatever you want to say. And I have a hard time believing that if we were trying to get both of them off-ball shots at the same time, that would end up working. The only way that I really think that could happen is if we start running a lot of three-guard lineups. But then you might end up limiting what someone like Arterio Morris is getting. And he was really good in the win over Louisiana because he went 9 of 11, had 25 points off the bench. And so really the only forward or big man that we have that can play the role of any sort of secondary or tertiary facilitator is Timmy Allen. Correct me. I guess Dylan Dessou is okay at kicking the ball back out or moving it around the perimeter, but he's struggling with knee issues again. So that's going to limit him. But I will say I have a tough time seeing a way for us to get both Tyrese Hunter and Marcus Carr involved at the same time. I think that there's ways that Tyrese Hunter can get involved a little bit more from inside the arc, or maybe maybe it's just a sort of thing where whoever's playing well that game, whoever's hot, keep them going. None of the three guards that we're talking about here are lights out shooters. So there's not one guy that you just want to keep feeding over and over and over again. I remember when we had Jace Fevers and, even Andrew Jones to some degree, they were both really good shooters from deep. And there were a lot of games where I was like, okay, they got a lot of space and we need to get the three ball going. Let's start feeding them. Even if they miss the first 4 shots, keep giving it to them. Eventually it'll start falling and it'll fall in droves. I don't think we have any of those guys right now. Hunter's not really a volume scorer like Carr is, but Man, I think we've unlocked something this season with Carr as an off-ball shooter and off-ball scorer. Here's an interesting stat for you, and this might help explain a little bit more of what I'm talking about. So I'm looking at Bartorvik here, and I've tried to dig in a lot into the off-ball stats. The problem is there's not a whole lot of tracking out there in terms of college hoops analytics. So last season, Carr shot 34% from three. I think that was still a career high for him. He was actually taking more assisted three-pointers last season. Okay, so second best of his career. Yeah. He was taking more assisted three-pointers than he was the season prior at Pitt, Minnesota, is where he transferred from initially. Now, this season, 82% of his three-pointers are assisted. And he's shooting the three ball at about 45%. So, damn near all of his three-pointers are catch and shoot. If not, they might just be open three-pointers, or, you might just get a few dribbles in. Yeah. It is very rare, though, that Marcus Carr is taking ISO contested threes, which we saw. I would like to know the situational stats, but we saw that more times last season where he was forcing up the three ball and we were getting late into the shot clock. I think we're avoiding that now for the most part, and that's making a huge difference. Another thing is we're seeing him, I mentioned earlier, we're seeing more of an NBA-style offense. So last year, Marcus Carr, let me see if I can find this. Yeah, okay, so yeah, this year, Marcus Carr is shooting for about 47% from the mid-range, which is solid. And about a quarter of his shots are assisted. So sometimes he's still taking a few steps within the 2-point line and finding that open mid-range if it's available. Still sometimes dribbling in and taking that shot. Only 5% of his mid-range shots last year were assisted. Wow. So just in general, he is doing a lot more with open shots, just maybe not even getting a single dribble off, just immediate catch and shoot. And so wrap this all up. I think it's hard to see Tyrese Hunter and Marcus Carr getting those sorts of open looks at the same time, because someone's got to be initiating. And I feel better with Tyrese Hunter doing that than I do Marcus Carr. I think the way I look at that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Those field goal percentage to assist numbers are pretty eye-opening, honestly. It shows how much the offense is kind of opened up and how much better this team is moving the ball than, previous editions of Texas basketball. But yeah, I think I agree. I mean, it is wishful thinking to expect, Carr and Hunter to average 18 points a game or something like that. The good thing about having both of them is if one of them does have an off night, there's a good chance the other is going to be there to pick them up. But I would say just one thing that you noted about Carr's shooting percentage. You mentioned Jace Febres, who was a guy who's pretty much strictly catch and shoot. Always seen as like a dead-eye three-point shooter, but pretty much always catch and shoot. I think people have to start respecting Marcus Carr more in that kind of category because he's proving it this year. If you look, like you mentioned, last season he shot 34% from deep, which was his second best in 4 collegiate seasons. I think a lot of that is because he was taking so many contested threes, but he's proven if he runs off ball screens and he's open that he can knock them down with the best in the country.
5 seasons now, and that's including the redshirt year that he had to sit out after his transfer from Pitt. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, yeah, I mean, his best season otherwise shooting from 3 was 36% during the 1920 campaign at at Minnesota. And before arriving at Texas, that season was the season that he had the highest percentage of his 3-point makes assisted. And so about an 8% increase from the second highest assisted total. So assisted frequency. Diving really deep into some intricate stats there, but the point of all this is to say that, yeah, I mean, I think there's enough to say in the trends now that Marcus Carr is a better catch and shoot or just off ball scorer. Gives him a chance to play on his feet, doesn't have to worry about as much about picking up the dribble, creating separation, and getting a shot off. He's not the tallest guard, and he's never, I mean, to be honest, he's never been the best at contested shots. Like, I don't think that's really his game. Maybe I'm wrong there, but man, he's had, especially, and maybe that's just recency bias because he's had some really ugly shots this season when he's been contested or double teamed.
No, I think I agree with you there. I think, I mean, at a point last season too, he was taking so many of those, like step back contested 15-footers that just because it can almost warp your mind. It's like, oh, he's taking a lot of these. He must be good at them. Then you look into the numbers and it's like, no, he really isn't making that many of those shots. A couple crucial ones down the stretch in games, but overall, that's not a really feasible mode of offense for this team. But he's definitely, matured as a scorer, as a player. Part of that is on him himself. I think part of it can be contributed to Rodney Terry, and part of it is who he's surrounded with this year and how much Tyrese Hunter has bought into the idea of like, I don't have to score that. I don't have to score 15 points a game. I can be more of a facilitator, more of, relating to football. You got wide receiver 1 who may occupy the safety over the top, and it's going to open up the slot for wide receiver 2. So, it's a great dynamic that these two have shown, and hopefully that continues through Big 12 play. But I would just mention one thing that I've noticed that is a bit concerning and something I hope changes. Might be, again, wishful thinking to hope this changes in Big 12 play, but the lack of getting to the line for this Texas team is going to hurt them in close games against good opponents. Right now, Texas scores about 14% of their points from the free throw line. This 319th in the country. Free throws attempt per game, just over 17. That's 205th in the country. Texas has never been a team, over the past decade that has gotten to the line a ton or even shot that well from the line. But you got to be better than, below the 50th percentile. Creep that number up to maybe like 100th in the country at least. Get to the line 25 times at least. And if you look at it, there's only 2 players, Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen, that are averaging more than 2 free throws per game. So, and ones aside, they're the only players who are getting fouled shooting at least one time a game, which is pretty absurd to think about. Hopefully that's just, the product of blowing a lot of teams out. The refs swallowed the whistle in the second half. That's what I'm hoping we can chalk it up to. But regardless, you see in this offense, they do settle a bit too much, not getting to the rim. Even when they do get to the rim, Tyrese Hunter has had a bit of a problem, I've noticed. He seems to play into the defender and not just, go up straight for the layup or the dunk, trying to draw the foul. And then the foul doesn't get called and he misses the layup, and, the other team's often running down the other court. I think the Texas has to be stronger around the rim, stronger when they're going up, and not look for the foul calls, because when you look for the foul call, that's when they're not going to come. But if you just play as if the defender's not there, odds are he's going to go through your arm trying to block the ball, and you're going to be going to the line. But those are some numbers that definitely are concerning, because against better defenses in the Big 12, you're going to have to manufacture points any way you can. One easy way to do that is getting to the line, and if Texas can't do that, they're going to be at a major disadvantage in some of these games.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm interested to see what. Yeah, I mean, I know that I've mentioned it, and I've actually I say that I've kind of stopped mentioning. Sorry about the background. I have kind of stopped mentioning the need to get to the free throw line because, I mean, we got off to a hot start against UTEP. The free throw attempt rate, was like 52.4%, which was by far the best of any game this season. And I dare say that it actually has gotten better in the last few games. But like you mentioned, I mean, it's been hovering around 20% in the last 4 That's still not great considering who Texas was playing and the athleticism advantage they had against teams like A&M Commerce and Louisiana. Yeah, I mean, last question I'll pose, because before we just get into an advanced analytics conversation about the non-con, what is the one adjustment that you would like to see from Texas heading into Big 12 play? And then we can transition more to talking about the OU game.
Ooh, one adjustment. I would say, that's an interesting question. I would say it would have to, my adjustment would have to involve Timmy Allen on the offensive end. You mentioned it. I mean, we've been mentioning it, talking about the cohesion between Carr and Hunter, and why Carr's getting so many open shots is that Hunter is taking a lot of the load as the primary ball handler. This has happened more in the last 4 to 6 games, but I'd like to see Allen really establish himself on the offensive end, rip and run with rebounds, get Allen the ball, at the high post, in the mid post, on the wings, and let him kind of survey the defense. Like Carr, he's in his 5th year of collegiate basketball, and I think he's probably the highest IQ player on this team. When you give him time and space, he can pick apart a defense like a good quarterback sitting back in the pocket. He's averaging over 4 assists this year, which that's got to be a career high for him. And I was thinking about this. So Allen and Carr both averaging 4.3 assists. Rarely have we seen even one Texas player average that many in a single season. I assume Matt Coleman probably got there. Maybe Isaiah Taylor once or twice back in those years. But over the past 7 years or so, it hasn't happened all that often. So that shows how much the ball is moving. And I'd like to see that continue with Allen kind of running like a point forward role. I'm looking at it right now. Since the Illinois game, which is kind of where he got his season's legs, over the last 6 games, he has 8 assists, 9 assists, 3 assists, 5 assists, 3 assists, 8 assists. Those are some incredible numbers, and I think they'll only go up the more you get the ball in his hands, let him initiate offense. And if you can kind of run some sort of offense, some sort of horn set where Allen has the ball, and you have like Cunningham and Mitchell as screeners for Hunter and Carr running around trying to get open around the arc, I think that is going to open up a lot of driving lanes to the hoop, as well as kick options to those guys shooting the 3, who we've mentioned are way better on catch and shoot than they are off the dribble. So I'd like to see the offense just continually progress in a way where Timmy Allen has the ball and he's the one making decisions. Because the one knock on Carr that we've seen in his time at Texas, and even Hunter after, like in the past 5 games after his hot start, they're susceptible to turnovers and not making the right play. And I feel like Timmy Allen, I feel pretty comfortable when he has the ball in his hands. And I feel comfortable with what he's going to do with it. If he does turn it over, it's going to be, trying to make a play.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way Timmy Allen's playing lately. I think you got to keep him at a bare minimum. You have to keep him involved as at least a secondary option in terms of facilitating on most of your drawn up offensive possessions, at least when you're in the settled half court. I have seen, I think in terms of what you're mentioning, I've seen some more of that where, Allen's working from the high elbow and, whether it's a pick and roll or a dribble handoff. We don't see a whole lot of pick and roll from this team. I think, Allen can do that, but I think you'd end up going more with Disu or Dylan Mitchell if you were going to do that as the roll man. Yeah, I think they're going to keep trying to get Timmy Allen more involved. He had 8 assists against A&M Commerce, and so
definitely his turning point of the season was that Illinois game, because a lot of the seasons he started slow, but since then he's seemingly gaining confidence each time he steps on the court, and I'd like to just see that continue. And I really like him playing with the ball in his hands. He plays under control. Whereas sometimes when the guards have the ball, things seem to get sped up. So I just feel comfortable with him, kind of facilitating and leading this offense. Obviously, you don't want him bringing it up the court every time like a point guard, but when there are opportunities to rip and run or find him on the outlet or give him the ball 15 seconds into the shot clock when something isn't working, I think you take those opportunities because he's going to make a play with it.
Yeah, that is true. And I mean, Timmy Allen he's really important if Texas wants to do what they're trying to do right now, because, we mentioned it maybe already, I don't know if that was on or off camera, but that, Dessou maybe is the only other big man that I would trust to, kind of facilitate from the inside out. Or hell, it doesn't even have to be from the inside out, the inside in, even if it's if you're getting the off-ball movement, down near the baseline, maybe find someone backdoor on the cuts. There's a number of ways you can make that work. I'm going to go with smaller tweaks, and then I'll round this whole thing out with like one interesting thought that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier. I'd like to see more decisive shooting from Brock Cunningham and Serge Rice. Let me elaborate a little bit more on each of those. Brock Cunningham, I'll give one quick stat that's kind of impressive. He is 20 of 45 from three-point range in the last 2 seasons. I don't think anyone pegged Brock Cunningham to be damn near a 50% three-point shooter at that sort of volume. Dude, I'll say it, keep feeding him the ball. Like, if he's out near the perimeter, get him the ball. I'd like to see him get a little bit more playing time. I know that there's like, it's a double-sided coin with Brock Cunningham with these like sort of adjustments to his game, because his role is so ingrained with this team that like, I get why it's been a slow adjustment to start getting him to shoot the 3-ball more. But I think we got other guys that can hit the offensive glass still pretty hard. And so I don't know if you need to have him down low as much. And if you got someone like Timmy Allen on the floor with him, then that's going to start clogging up the inside a little bit. Keep him out near the perimeter. So I'd like to see that. Sometimes you're seeing him still give up the ball if he's got, 3 or 4 feet of space, at least between him and the defender. I'd like to see him shoot those. The other one is for Serge Rice. This one's a little bit more complicated, to where like there's some intricacies that I found in his game since looking at his film from Mexico State and seeing how he's played through the non-con that are interesting. So Jabari Rice, he's not, I mean, I mentioned it when we picked him up. He can be a good facilitator. He can shoot the ball pretty well. He can get to the rim, or he can get through the lane, drive to the rim. He can be around a 35% three-point shooter. And he has pretty good court vision. He makes pretty good decisions when he knows what he's doing. If he ends up being a last resort option when he's getting the ball within like 8 seconds left in the shot clock and he's got to improvise, he's not a great improviser, I guess is what I'm trying to say, when you're in the offensive half court, or you're the settled half court offense. He can be good improvisational player in transition, but that's a completely different setup. That's a different conversation. He does best when, like, okay, maybe you end up having him as a PJ Tucker sort of role when he's just out there on the wing, and in the snap of a finger, he's either going to keep moving the ball or he's going to get a three-point shot up. Or if you want to have him doing backdoor cuts, if you want to get him to draw out closer to the perimeter to maybe do a little pick and pop with someone, and you got someone like Tyrese Hunter or like Marcus Carr that can still shoot it well from mid-range, whatever. Get him in more like confident circumstances. And that comes back to the whole idea of like the entire team as a whole. They're more decisive right now. It's more purpose driven of like the passes they're making. You can tell like, oh, we're not just playing drive and kick ball. We're not just playing ISO ball. We're getting guys open to hit these efficient like 3-point shots or open shots off off a screen or off a dribble handoff, the words that I've said a million times in this video already. And so, I think Jabari Rice is one player that we're still seeing him getting the ball late in shot clock situations sometimes, and Texas is just letting him improvise just because they feel like, oh, this guy can pass, he can shoot, he can do it all, so let's let him improvise. And I don't think that's the right role for him if you're really digging deep into it. So those are two really in-depth adjustments that I would like to see, because Brock Cunningham and Jabari Rice are those sort of like team glue guys that can make a huge difference when you need someone to step up late in a game when maybe Carr or Hunter is going cold. And so I'd like to see that. Or I'd like to see both those adjustments, I guess, kind of tying in together of just them being more purpose-driven and aggressive with their decision-making.
I would say just one, I completely agree. And one thing, just a quick point to build off that is, Jabari Rice's ball fakes, some of the best I've seen at the collegiate level. And if you watch one Texas game, you'll see a couple incredible ball fakes from him. Building off what you were saying, it's gotten to a point where the ball fakes are almost frustrating because they're so good and they'll get the defender to fly by, and then he doesn't do a whole lot with it. Like, he then will take a dribble and isn't playing super aggressive or decisive, where I'd like to see, once that defender goes by, either take a step in and shoot the shot or drive to the rim, and something good is going to happen. I think that just completely builds off with what you're saying is he's right there, and there's just a few things here and there that, if tweaked, would make him super consistent and a real threat. Well, I mean, he already is a real threat, but would just improve his game that much.
It's true. I mean, yeah, you make a good point. Those shot fakes, some of those have been pretty crazy.
Yeah, they're so good.
Yeah,
incredible. I literally, every time I see it, I forgot to have 15 tweets this season about Jabari Rice ball fake. But then it's what happens after. I wish there was a little bit more.
Yeah, he hasn't been super consistent with his the confidence in his game, at least, to work through contact, get to the rim, or be able to basically do something to draw contact or drive the rim, something to get points, to get buckets. To some degree, you just got to be a bucket getter sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta be a bucket getter. I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. The last thing I wanted to kind of pontificate on, if you will, before we jump into the OU preview and then just give our Big 12 predictions as a whole. One player that we mentioned earlier is Arterio Morris. I've mentioned the idea of more three-guard lineups, and I'm not so much talking about Jabari Rice because I think he's more of a true wing at this point for Texas. We played him more at small forward than we have as a two-guard, which I figured would be the case. So here's something interesting. I thought once Arterio Morris started to find his game, we would see more three-guard lineups out there, given how Texas could probably do a little bit more in the backcourt with that, in terms of moving the ball, getting someone like Tyrese Hunter more open shots. We haven't run even so much as 1% of a five-man combination with a three-guard lineup in the last month. Do you think we start running more of those?
So when you say three-guard lineup, are you is that solely Carr, Hunter, and Morris? Or are you considering Rice?
Not Rice.
So the three-guard lineup with Carr, Hunter, and Morris?
Yeah.
I think it would be effective. I mean, so we're just coming off of talking about confidence and aggression issues that may lack with Cunningham and Rice. Morris certainly does not lack either confidence.
No. Hell no.
He will let it fly, which is a good trait. And I mean, the good thing about that too is that attitude is shown on the defensive end of the floor as well. I've been really impressed with Morris on defense. He's not always in the right position, but he's always, competing his ass off and is always in the scrum, in the mix, going for loose balls. So I think you're afforded some misses on the offensive end when you play that hard on defense. But I think it would be really interesting because to tie this all back into what we started talking about at the beginning of the episode with Carr and Hunter and those two-man lineups and why Carr is so successful off the ball because Hunter's drawing all the defense. If you add Morris and a Morris who's shooting the ball well, that just magnifies the problem for defenses. If Hunter has the ball at the top of the key, running like a pick and roll with a Disu, with a Mitchell, and then you have Carr on one wing and Morris on the other, there's going to have to be some dropping and some switching from the defense that's going to leave both those guys open. I think thus far, from the 12-game sample size we've seen, Morris isn't a consistent three-point shooter. I mean, he's shooting 28% from deep. Over the past 2 games, he is 6 of 11, so it's improving, obviously helped by that 5 of 7 performance against Louisiana from long range. But I think in order for three-guard lineups to be successful, Morris is going to have to turn into a more consistent three-point shooter. I just don't see an offense where you have Carr and Hunter on the court at the same time, and you're going to turn to a guy like Morris to initiate. So I think if and when those three do play together, Morris is going to have to turn into more of like a catch and shoot or a catch and 2 dribble type of guy, which he certainly can be. He just hasn't shown super like a ton of consistency with that. And if he's not showing a lot of consistency on the offensive end, I think the negatives on the defensive end with how small that three-guard lineup would be isn't worth it. So basically, my long-winded answer coming down short is if Arterio Morris can prove that he's a reliable three-point shooter and that the first 10 games were him getting his college feet wet, and he's actually more like a 35% from deep guy, then I'd love to see the three-guard lineup. But if he's still inconsistent and he doesn't figure that out through Big 12 play, I think it's just going to hurt you more on the defensive end than it helps you on the offensive end.
Interesting. Well, and I was just thinking about this. We don't need to dig into this too much because I guess we got to move forward. I forgot that Brumbaugh played for us for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so for some reason, like whatever Instagram aggregation is always weird, but he's like always at the top of my feed. So I'm always like, oh, okay. I always see him, but yeah, it's an interesting piece, and this is a whole nother tangent, but I like getting a top 150 recruit and being able to stash him as a redshirt. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, that's true. I would like to see something from his game because we don't have another 6'4" point guard. But yeah. Anyway, that's true. I mean, I think either way you look at that, if we end up using him later, or more than likely, just going to keep him for a red shirt, then that is nice to see. Because, man, we're going to need it if we don't get another point guard or if we end up losing AJ. So, anyway, moving on. Okay, OU preview, and we're running up. I wanted to keep this under an hour, so let's try to keep this a little bit brief. Let's go ahead and get just go for it. Straight up thoughts and prediction for the OU game.
I mean, Oklahoma is just not as talented as a team as Texas. They had their early season struggles, seemed to work through them a little bit, culminating with that win over Florida about a week ago. But just not as talented as Texas. Grant Sherfield, 18 points a game. Could be considered the best scorer on the court. Like, I don't think that's a stretch to say. But if you go down the roster and you're looking at – if you're drafting these rosters, I think 7 of the first 10 picks are coming from Texas, with maybe Sherfield and the Groves brothers being the 3 that come from Oklahoma. I could be underselling the Sooners here, but I don't know. I just haven't been overly impressed with them this season. Granted, going into Norman is going to be a tough atmosphere, obviously. Texas in their one kind of – I mean, they really haven't played a true road game, but the one game outside of the state of Texas this year in Madison Square Garden, they lost. So that is a bit of a concern for me, how this team is going to survive what is going to be should be a pretty raucous environment in Norman. But Texas is the better team. I think if you can limit Sherfield, then I don't think you're going to have a problem stopping Oklahoma on offense. And with what we've seen from the Texas offense of late, I'd be confident that this team can put up 75-plus points on Oklahoma pretty easily. So I might be a little bullish here, but I could easily see the Horns going into Norman and coming out with a comfortable 10-point win.
Yeah, I can see that too. I mean, so I'll say this. I don't think there's so much you can do to, prove. Sherfield has only one game where he shot less than 30% from three. He's the nation's leader in three-point shooting percentage at damn near 57%, man. Shooting 5.5 attempts a game. My Lord. He's on something else right now. But they've lost some games where he's been shooting, when he's been on from three. Arkansas game's a good example of that. Villanova game, another one. So, I mean, limit Sherfield, sure, but like I think the Groves brothers, I mentioned them off camera, limit what they can do.
Yeah.
On the three ball, because Jacob Groves, I think he's still shooting around 43% from three on a few attempts per game. The three ball is just so important to what OU does that, and because there's just not a good offense otherwise. They're shooting damn near 40% from three, largely thanks to Sherfield. And so they're averaging 69 points per game. That's outside of the top 250. And that's where, with the way the offense is looking right now, I mean, this is a game on paper that does heavily favor Texas. You just got to execute.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first true road game. Like you said, you just have to execute. There's not really many matchups where I point out and I'm like, yeah, that's super lopsided for OU. I mean, maybe like Tyrese Hunter or Marcus Carr has an off game defensively and Sherfield goes off for like 25. But even with him getting 25, OU is built in such a way that he's just the star player and they're not good enough around him to say, okay, he's giving us 25, we're automatically going to win. So, but
yeah, I agree. I kind of said that in passing to not to discredit. I don't want people coming at me. I said limit Sherfield kind of in passing, like that's possible. Like you mentioned, hell of a scorer, one of the best 3-point shooters in the country. Limiting him would be him scoring 15 points. And if you do something like that, and I don't think Tanner and Jacob Groves are going to combine for 30. I mean, I remember, I'm pretty sure they're from Eastern Washington when they played Kansas in the tournament. They were fun, and I was like, oh, they committed to Oklahoma. Especially Tanner, he could be a real problem, but just really hasn't impressed me, hasn't brought a whole lot of juice. Is a good player, but it's like a bit undersized for a post guy, and like, I don't know. I mean, like you mentioned, Jacob shooting well from deep, but they're just not as impressive. The Grove brothers aren't as impressive as I thought they would be. Certainly good players in the Big 12 Conference, but if you're relying on them as your 2 and 3 scorers, I think you're going to have problems, which we've seen, putting the ball in the hoop.
Yeah, they are. I mean, yeah, they're probably the next key for me to be able to limit them. But yeah, I guess it is pretty straightforward when we're talking about the preview for this game. OU, they're a decent defensive team. They are pretty disciplined under Porter Moser, but they're giving up only 60 points per game. But against better teams, like what did Arkansas put up, like 88 on them? So
yeah.
Against better teams, they are not as good. So I'm not super worried about this. Again, it's just, how does Texas respond to the road environments? Do they get phased like they did late against Illinois? Or does Texas actually step it up and play like they have been playing at the Moody this season? So I'm going to say, because I think that this is going to be another higher scoring game, I'm going to go 79-72 Texas.
I'm going to go 77-70 Texas.
Okay, so we're in a similar ballpark on this.
Yeah.
I haven't checked the line yet. I don't think it's out, but at least I checked yesterday, but nothing released yet. So we'll see.
Tom has Texas projected only win by 2. So
Wow.
Just something to note.
They're high on OU. I saw that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, not to completely spiral, but the lowest ranked team in KenPom right now in the Big 12 is Kansas State, and they're 51. So literally every game on this Big 12 schedule is going to be every game is going to be a quad 1 or quad 2 with a ton of quad 1 games.
Yeah, that's true. And then not to be superstitious here, but in terms of giving up 3-point shooting, Texas in the 4 games that Terry's been the acting head coach, Rice was 32% shooting from 3, Stanford was 44.4, Louisiana was 31.6, and then Texas A&M Commerce was 46.7.
Wow.
So every other game, Texas has given up around 32% from 3. So you know what? The pattern says that OU is going to shoot 32% from 3.
I'm good with that, but we have to break that pattern the other way. Can't be giving up 45% every other game.
No, especially not against a team like Kansas State because that's the next game up. But anyway, okay, so this is a good segue. Where do you think Texas finishes in the Big 12 compared to where you thought at the beginning of the season? I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but let's try to wrap it all up. And then who do you think wins the Big 12 for the regular season?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning of the season, I said they're going to finish third with a 13-5 record. I'm going to stick with third. I'm going to bump that record down to 12-6. I think that's fair. I just think with all the off-the-court stuff still kind of over the head of this program, as well as, some inconsistencies that we did see in the Illinois game closing out, I just don't trust this team to be able to go on the road and close most games that they play in. And I wouldn't – this isn't a team either that I think is, totally guarded against the upset. I think there's a chance they could get beat in Moody by a team that's not nearly as good as them. So I think when it all averages out and the dust settles, they'll be a 12-6 Big 12 team, which at that rate probably gets you a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. But between Baylor and Kansas, I want to pick Baylor just because I'm so in love with their 3-headed monster of a backcourt. But they're just missing one, big man who's like a real contributor. Like Flo Thamba is a good player, but I just feel like their front court depth might hurt them. So I think I'm going to go by one game. Kansas edges out Baylor. Grady Dick turning into a hell of a player. And when you have 6'6", 6'7" wings like Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick, who can handle the ball the way they do, scoring from all 3 levels at the college level, they're going to be tough to beat. So I'd say Kansas 1, Baylor 2, Texas 3.
Yeah, I'll go Texas number 2. No, fuck it. I'll go Texas number 2. I'll say that it's kind of a log jam because I think that like you meant, I think there's questions about Baylor that they haven't had in the last few years. Baylor has shown more flaws and that they're a little bit more beatable. I mean, God knows, man. They beat Washington State by 6 and then Northwestern State by 10 in their last 2 games. And I don't think that's a fluke. I think that's just the way they are this season. I think that they can play really well, and I think they will be able – I think they will improve as the season goes along. But this is probably a next-year team for Baylor, depending on if, Keontae George and LJ Cryer stick around for another year. Keontae George.
I think that's wishful thinking. I think LJ George is probably gone. But
yeah, probably. But either way, I think Baylor is mostly a next-year team still. I think they're still – I mean, they just don't have the strength that they did last season. Or the season before that, obviously. Yeah, I'll go Texas number 2, eking it out over Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor. Actually, I think West Virginia might actually finish higher than TCU. I like West Virginia this season. Yeah, let's go West Virginia above TCU. Anyway, and then yeah, I'll go with Kansas as the regular season champion. So I just, like you said, I think that they're just a little too good. Okay. Well, there we have it. We're cutting it off right in an hour right now. So any closing thoughts that you got or anything else?
No, I would just say Big 12 as a whole, like we mentioned, can be a gauntlet every game. That said, I don't foresee. I mean, we both have Kansas winning the league. I don't foresee them being like 2020, 2021 Baylor, where they're just running through the league pretty much unscathed. I think Kansas, even though they win the league, they'll still probably finish like 15-3. So there are going to be chances to beat them, which is good. Chances to win every game, chances to lose every game for the remainder of the season. There's not one game on the current schedule or the Big 12 tournament schedule or the NCAA tournament schedule that you can't lose the rest of the way. So that'll make it real interesting for Texas basketball.
They most certainly are going to have a tough run. At least you start out. Honestly, it doesn't start all that bad because we get OU and then Kansas State at home. I think you had mentioned that, and so that's not too bad. Building up some momentum and confidence, I think, for this team to start out Big 12 play would be a really, really positive thing. So, yeah, all right. Well, I'm sure we'll probably have something here in the next, like maybe a week down the road as we start getting into some of the bigger games with Texas coming up. So anyway, for Andrew Miller at HoganHeadlines.com, Shane Black, that's pretty much it. We got bowl game today for football, so we need to cover that we still have coming up. Hook 'em.